I was gonna ask Jason. One time in one of the episodes, we brought up the whole thing about 2001 being boring.
Yeah.
So I wanted to maybe do a short discussion about boring movies. The whole concept of what makes a good boring movie versus a boring movie. Like what is that like examples of movies that maybe we know are slow, but they're still engaging enough to not be boring, and then other ones that just fall completely flat and they're just boring.
I had
And
not
what
really
is
ever
that?
thought about it before.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Can you think of examples of slow movies that you do like, and then comparing that to slow movies that you don't like?
Slow movies that I do like. I mean, right off the top of my head, Manchester by the Sea was one that I really liked. That's a very slow movie.
Do you have any you can think of that are, because Manchester by the Sea is very dialogue driven, so that could be partially what helped
Absolutely.
specifically in that
Yeah.
case. Like it was really solid, like a really solid script. Like are there any examples of, say, foreign films that are slow but that you really connected with?
I mean, it's kind of a relative thing at that point, right? I mean, uh, compared to today's movies, mostly everything made 45 to 50 years ago is pretty slow. Uh, but
Yeah.
also, and then there's the foreign aspect too. I mean, even though they weren't made that far apart from each other, the Magnificent Seven is significantly faster paced than the Seven Samurai. I still think that I wouldn't really call the Seven Samurai a slow film per se. I mean, it is slow by some standards, of course, but it's kind of still an action movie in a way.
That's true. That's a good example. I feel like Kurosawa movies are
Mhm.
kind of slow, but very deliberate and very engaging. Like they're very there is dialogue and they're very action driven. There's always some sort of action going on, whether it's action or just spectacle. With some exceptions, like the dramas that he has are maybe
Yeah,
just um, like maybe more dialogue heavy. But Akira, that's one of my favorite. One of his is an
yeah,
example of like a super slow movie that's not super heavy on the dialogue, but that one I think is the perfect example. The reason why that works for me is there's so much going on there visually. It's just a
yeah.
feast for the eyes as far as like what he does with the camera. He does this with all his movies, but
That
but
one in particular, though.
yeah, and we've studied in film school too, like the shapes, the transitions from dream
Yeah.
to the real world, the flashback, the structure of the movie. It's so sophisticated. It's
Side
definitely
note, not involving this conversation, but I haven't seen it since we were in school, and I have it on my queue on HBO Max. I'm planning to rewatch that one pretty soon.
yeah, no, it's worth a rewatch. It's
For
really
sure.
slow, but it's to me it's like it's like his Citizen Kane in a way, or at least not in that sense actually, because trying to think what would be an equivalent from Orson Welles, but it just feels mostly in the sense that he just threw everything on there.
Yeah.
And it works. Like sometimes it doesn't work when what was that line? Matt always likes to make fun of. At some point he said that about who was the teacher, like in the visual design, something in film school, and he was saying,
Oh, uh,
Mark.
what he said to me?
Oh, something about like I think Matt, you said at some point about like, well, you can throw all the visual design elements into one movie and it's gonna look like shit. But it's not gonna work. Something along those lines. But I feel like Citizen Kane and Akira's those types of movies where they really just throw everything on there, and it works. It just really it's rare. Sometimes it's just too much when there's a lot in
Yeah.
one movie, but those are like two examples of movies that there's just so much in there, but it works.
Two things that just jumped into my mind. Just along the exact same point that we were already just talking about, just kind of same exact point hammered home, but comparing Kurosawa again, I mean, maybe a better example would have been Yojimbo versus Fistful of Dollars. I mean, that's significant. I mean, Fistful of Dollars is a much, I think it's a much faster paced movie than The Magnificent Seven. Which our memories probably seems fast paced because you remember the big giant shootout at the end, but it's pretty slow paced movie throughout the middle. Whereas I think that the American version of in the second example is much more different than Yojimbo.
Yeah, I mean it's but those two also, as like Sergio Leone is very engaging. His whole shtick was to
Sure.
be engaging because there's so much tension in every scene, and maybe for like 2001, I feel Kubrick was good at this, not to the extent that Sergio Leone was, but it's the Kubrick stare. There's this thing about like characters stare, and there's so much intensity in those moments, whether it's in Clockwork Orange, which is more fast paced, but in Full Metal Jacket, there's all the movies, and 2001. It's the slowest of the bunch for sure, 2001, but there's a lot of very tense moments there when there is conflict. It's just that there's a lot of moments without conflict in it.
The stuff on the spaceship is outstanding.
Yeah, it's pretty tense.
Yeah.
There's some really tense moments there. So it's really, yeah. But Kubrick that's why he's good. Like that's why he's that good, because he found a very good balance. A lot of the foreign films, like you look at some of the Bergman stuff, and doesn't give you as much. It's.
Well, I actually, if I may interject, it's kind of funny that we're talking about slow movies that work, and yet we haven't brought up the Russians yet.
I was going to get to that. No, I was waiting. Tarkovsky is at the top of the, or bottom, depending on how you look at it, of the totem pole.
I mean,
it's as boring as it gets. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like nostalgia. I mean, he always blew an entire film mag on one guy trying to set up a candle on a post in the last scene of the movie. I mean, it's like 9 minutes of a guy walking back and forth with a candle.
There's also Kieslowski is another one. I heard like an interview or something that in one of I think it was the Decalogues, or I don't remember, one of the things that he made, there's a shot where somebody pushes a sugar cube onto a coffee cup or something, or a teacup, and it's supposed to absorb the tea, and then once it gets absorbed, it turns from white to brown. Then he dips it in there, or the character, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
So he was talking about how they were trying to find the perfect sugar cube that would take exactly 3 seconds and no longer to turn brown, because they didn't want the thing to be boring. And I'm like, what are you talking about? All your movies are like exhaustingly boring. You're concerned about like 3 seconds versus 5 seconds of the sugar cube turning brown. That's your concern. I think we'll last those 5 seconds. But you go, actually, Matt. No, I'll come back to it.
Okay. Actually, if you want to talk about slow movies, I don't think you can get away from Alexander Sokurov, who, he made Russian Ark, the first movie that was ever done in one continuous shot. It was just one 96-minute long shot. And, but, you were Gil, I think you were kind of alluding to, okay, so what's the difference between a slow movie that works and a slow movie that doesn't work? And a large part of it for me, at least what ran through my head, is that a slow movie that works is one that you can think of where you think about yourself in an art museum and you're looking at a painting and you're looking at one of the most beautiful paintings that you'll ever see. And just having the sense to cut each of your shots after the point has been reached that a person would just be like, okay, I've taken in this painting, I got it, I'm moving on. A bad slow movie is one that doesn't give you those beautiful images, that doesn't give you all that much to look at, and still makes you look at it longer than you would actually want to. And I think that Alexander Sokurov managed to do both of those things. I actually, I mean, look, Russian Ark is still kind of a boring movie. I'm not going to.
Definitely.
Yeah. But it's kind of fun. It's kind of cool. It's something that I still recommend that people watch. But his movie, Mother and Son, I mean, like the opening shot of the movie, you're looking at it and it looks kind of funky because he shot it anamorphic, but he's shifted the mesmerizer, the element in the lens that actually creates the squeeze, so that it would be like skewed, and so it was like everything was kind of squished off to the side, and it looked nice and it looked like a painting, and I could sit there and look at it for like a minute and be like, okay, wow, this is a really cool shot. And then the shot lasted for 6 minutes.
Wow.
And then he went on to another shot that, again, yeah, I could look at this for a minute, and it went on for 8 minutes, and so on and so forth. And it just became dull. So, I mean, I think it's just one of those things where, if you're going to talk about like I don't even know if I like to use the word slow, but like a prodding pace, like a methodical pace for a movie. Usually these are things that, like, well, also think about Terrence Malick. I mean, there aren't many shots in the Tree of Life that are held on longer than you would want to look at them. Yeah,
There aren't any? I'm not sure.
I said there aren't many.
Oh, there aren't many. Okay.
Yeah.
There are definitely some.
Yeah.
Definitely so.
So, I mean, I really think that it's more in the editing than it is anything else. I mean, like, that scene in Nostalgia that I was just talking about with Tarkovsky, that is a slow, prodding scene. And it's not the easiest thing in the world to watch, but you're watching something developing in front of your eyes and you're seeing it in real time. And it's always kind of interesting, and the performance is there. So, like, to me, that is a good example of a slow movie being done well. Whereas there are just certain movies where it's just like, if you start looking at your watch thinking, how long has this been on the screen, that's when you're falling into a problem.
So let me ask you a question.
Okay, go ahead.
So it sounds to me like what you're saying is very similar to a previous conversation we've had about an entirely different aspect of filmmaking, or a different thing. it sounds to me like you're saying that there isn't any problem with anything being any pace, slow, fast, or whatever. But if you're going to have a slow, deliberate pace to something, you have to almost justify it with what you're putting there. And when it's not justified, there's a sense, the audience gets a sense of like either boredom, which is really bad, or even like a sense that whoever made it is the nature of the film itself is almost kind of pretentious at some point.
Yeah.
So in a way, wouldn't you say that that relates very closely to one of our older conversations about the use of all the things that we would generally consider elements of melodrama within a movie? Because same thing with that, you can use the exact same music score on two different, climactic moments of a movie, and if one did a great job investing you in the characters and in the story, and there's this moment and it pays off, and this like very obvious score hits, and it's like, this big climactic da, 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 and you're like, oh wow, and it just feels right. And then the other one hasn't even come close to earning it, and you just roll your eyes and almost laugh.
I think it's similar, yeah. It's kind of like when you watch Iron Chef America, and the music on that show is more dramatic than Holocaust movies. I mean, and it's just like no, it's just kind of funny, when Iron Chef America has like this epic score coming in, and for
because
some
it's
reason,
Iron Chef America, it's that important.
Yeah, right. But no, I mean, I think that in general, you have to have your finger on the pulse of your audience, and I mean, artists are all masturbators in a certain way. I mean, like we all
Two-hand versus one.
Both hands, full bore, yeah. I mean, in order to feel like expressing ourselves is something that other people should actually want to sit down and watch and listen to. I mean, there's a certain amount of hubris that has to come along with that. I mean, it just comes with the territory.
More masturbation jokes.
Yeah, right. It comes COMES. Yeah, but I mean, that's where we can also fall into that trap of thinking that we've got something so brilliant. Yeah, and also, incidentally, I think this is why there's a really good argument for saying that you shouldn't edit your own movie. You should hire somebody else to do it, because if you directed something and you're like in love with the shot and everything that went into it, it is really hard for you to just say, doesn't fit, cut it out.
I would also argue that for me personally, I shouldn't edit my own movies because I'm very bad at it.
Well, yeah, that too. I mean, so am I. So, yeah.
Definitely attest to the technical part. I wish that I could find someone to edit my movies, because I do feel like they would benefit from a second eye. But I guess that's why you show your movies to people and try to get feedback, or you trick yourself. You try to do things slightly differently with every edit. But yes, there's no question that just in general, it's a collaborative effort. So I think the more brains you have working on the same story, as long as there's one person guiding the ship for consistency, I think it benefits, apparently, except for the Coen brothers, who edit their own movies and just do a really good job. But I think most people need that.
I was going to make some weird half-baked joke about, like, don't tell Robert Rodriguez that.
That too, although his movies are not as good as the Coen Brothers, so
Certainly
he's
not.
got some problems. But
Yeah.
he's a great filmmaker. I mean, the fact that he does everything is amazing. But
I
they're
love
not
Robert Rodriguez, and I wouldn't talk any shit about him at all. But I did recently start watching that third mariachi movie, the Once Upon a Time in Mexico or something. And I got about halfway through, and I was just like, I think I'm going to finish this some other time.
Yeah. But what I will say about the slowness thing is definitely everything you said makes sense. Music is part of it. Spectacle is some of it. I mean, 2001 again is always going to be a good example. Like the music choices are brilliant, like
Yeah.
next level genius. Like the fact that he said like, I'm going to take you to space and it's all going to be slow because everything is slow in space because there's no gravity and blah blah blah. But that's going to be boring. So I'm going to give you beautiful classical music, and and not to mention that is like the blue Deneb thing, that's related to the also to the constellation. I think it's just the choices of music is just so perfect for every scene, and that's why it's not boring. Like I think they tried to do the same thing in the first Star Trek movie,
Yeah.
and there's all these long shots of the ship and stuff. But
Yeah.
and it's a good movie score and everything. I think it was like Jerry Goldsmith or something.
Yeah.
And it's a good movie score, but it's not the Blue Denim. It's not. It doesn't have the same intellectual thought going into it. It is masturbation.
It's a pretty bad movie.
It's they're masturbating over the ship, like, oh, look at this the fancy, we're shooting it fancy, not like in the TV show because this is a movie. But Kubrick was doing something completely different. Like he really like he slows things down. He's like, this is gonna be slow, but I want you to experience this. It's almost like a spiritual thing, and it totally works because of the use of music and stuff. And then other times it's whether it's the intensity, the emotion, sometimes giving a shot longer so you can assess everything that's going on in the character's mind, or if there's a complex background to assess or more to the scene. But the one thing I once told, this was to a girl on a date back in and probably the most pretentious time in my life is after like 2 years of like I wasn't in film school, but I was like in community college, but I was taking film classes and stuff, but I was getting all into it. I went back to Israel and I went on a date with this girl, and I told her the thing about slow foreign films is that the way that they're different from generic movies is generic movies engage with you. Foreign films or slow movies, you have to engage with. And because you have to make that extra effort to engage, they don't come to you, you have to come to them. Ultimately, if you're able to connect, it's a more rewarding experience. Like it's more work, it's more attention. You can't be a passive viewer, but that's why they're so rewarding. It doesn't always work because sometimes you're either not in the mood to engage or to put in the effort, um, or if the movie fails, like you did your best, but you just couldn't click with it, and then you just lose it, like I have in some of Tarkovsky's movies, and it loses you. It is what it is, and that could happen with a slow movie. That could happen with Tenet too. If the audience is confused, we discussed that. You just get boring because you just are not following along anymore. You check out. So that was like one theory that I once had. I don't know.
I think as pretentious as that might be, I don't think you're wrong.
I mean, I was just thinking you sound like Marshall McLuhan.
What?
What?
Marshall McLuhan?
Don't know who that is.
The medium is the message. Hot and cold media. He was like a good friend
I've
of
heard
Andy
you say those
Warhol's.
phrases before. I still don't know who Marshall McLuhan is.
Yeah, it's a lot of names in the world.
He was the
I know
guy
the quote.
that Woody Allen pulled out from behind the marquee at the movie theater to explain to the guy standing behind him in line for the movie that he knows nothing of his work, and
Yeah.
yeah, but no, I mean that was Marshall McLuhan's whole thing of hot and cold media, and he always referred to cinema as being a hot medium in that it's something where the audience can be passive and the movie just kind of like assaults your senses and washes over you, and you don't really have to do anything, whereas books are a cold medium because you actually have to be actively engaged.
I think that's an interesting point, but I think like what Gil was talking about, I think film can definitely be a, to use those terms, a cold medium. It's just
Yeah.
that it's less common that people make movies like that.
No, actually, that was kind of what I was alluding to. But
And by the way, books are not exclusively cold mediums. There's some books that are page turners, and some books that you can barely get through a page because it's so dense. So it just depends on the style of writing. I mean, there's the Harry Potter books. You can't compare Harry Potter to Moby Dick. Those are very two different types of books. Not to mention comic books with the graphics too. That was essentially like a hot medium that was built into a reading.
Well, I mean, again, I am oversimplifying Marshall McLuhan, but I mean, just what you
Yeah.
were talking
Oh
about.
no, yeah, I'm not arguing against it.
Yeah,
I'm just saying that I think all mediums have exactly like I mean, paintings could be the same thing. You can have a painting that's just gorgeous and beautiful, and it looks nice, but then a painting could be more complex.
I mean, essentially what we're talking about here is the whole issue again of movies like what Gil was talking about versus more accessible movies. You know, I wouldn't say that a movie is lesser for being more accessible to a wider audience, but there's definitely something to be said for when you have a challenging movie that expects you to invest your brain into actually, getting through it. And then you get to the end and it all comes together and you're like, oh shit. And then it happens and you're like, it's like a whole new appreciation, for that film and that filmmaker and the story and everything, So yeah, I mean, but that's a dangerous game to play, I mean, it's, you can make great films that are also very accessible. It's just a matter of whether you want to do it that way.
Well, I mean, especially nowadays, when, so much of the media that we consume is like so quick and passive. Yeah, I mean, like, to use the Marshall McLuhan language, I mean, something like television would be the hottest medium out there, to the point that you don't even have to pay attention to it, and it's still kind of like seeping into your brain in some way, or in some way, shape, or form. And so, like, even making a 2-hour movie, and like my niece and nephew, my niece has a pretty strong attention span. My nephew doesn't. But it's hard to get them to sit down and watch a 2-hour movie now, because everything is just kind of 15-second videos on TikTok. But so, like, you really do need to rely upon people to be able to get all the way through what you're trying to do and what you're trying to say, and then finally, when you get to the payoff, you've got to deliver something. It's just kind of weird. I was thinking about, and this is something to kind of throw out to you guys too. Just movies where the last scene or the last few lines actually made the movie really good, or the last scene or the last few lines made the movie worse. And I mean, it's just one of those things where I come back to something like Shutter Island, which I thought was not one of Martin Scorsese's best movies, but you finally get to the end of that movie, and Leonardo DiCaprio just kind of seemingly pretends to go back to regress into his psychosis. And then before he's going off to be lobotomized, he just says to Mark Ruffalo, this place is making me wonder which is worse, living as a monster or dying, living as a monster or dying as a good man. Fuck.
What was that? Sorry.
Shutter Island?
Oh, Shutter Island. Yeah. Oh, I need to see that one, mainly because I know there's a big
shit! I just gave it up.
That's okay. I might have missed it.
He might not. You actually didn't, especially if he wasn't fully paying attention. You might not have actually given it up.
I wasn't. I was actually.
You didn't say the key parts about what the ending of that movie is.
Yeah.
All right. I mostly was actually. I looked up something about 2001 because I wanted to correct myself. I did notice in a few of these discussions I say stupid stuff. So I was like, did I say something stupid about that? It's like, yeah. Well, what I think I intended to say about the blue denim is not the constellation. Is that it's a waltz, like the waltz. That the fact that the spaceships are dancing in space is why he used the waltz. I confused things there, but anyways, not a big deal. Who cares? It's fine. It's actually good for me to embarrass myself because I deserve it. So that's how I'll learn. But yeah, no, it's interesting. I think Tarkovsky is a very good example because I remember sitting at the New Beverly and watching all 4 hours plus of Andrei Rublev, and I wasn't really bored. It was really good. But then other times, I think I've seen an hour and a half movie of his, a much shorter. I think it might have been Stalker or something. And I was just, oh my goodness, this is unbearable. I don't know. I think it's just all those movies are probably good because some people connected with them and they like them. But it's just that it's with those type of movies, if you specifically don't connect or not in the mood to engage, they just lose you, and then all they look is boring. And I think it's your niece and nephew. It makes sense that it's tough for them to sit through 2-hour movies. If you show them 2001, you're gonna lose their mind. It's just not gonna work. But all of a sudden they'll be 21, 22. They'll be in college or something, and they'll want to experience something new. And all of a sudden, all these movies that were just snore fests when they were younger, they'll give them a second chance, and all of a sudden, not in all cases, some people just never connect with them, but they might have a different experience. I definitely did. So,
well, and then there's some movies where no matter how many times you go back and rewatch it, no matter what age you are just just boring, terrible movies.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of ones that I've gone back. Blade Runner. That's
Thin Red Line.
That's a Thin Red Line. That's pretty boring.
I love Thin Red Line.
I need to rewatch it.
Terrible
I watched
movie.
it the first time. It's just too slow. It's a bit too slow with not enough of a payoff for that. Yeah. And I like Terrence Malick, but it's just a hit and miss.
I like Terrence Malick too, but that movie is grossly overrated.
Oh, I mean, it was definitely cursed by coming out the same year as Saving Private Ryan, which,
a much better movie.
I'm not going to deny that. I mean, Saving Private Ryan is a better movie.
Many people would.